How do you go from this
DeAndre Ayton, there is nothing to think about. There is nothing to talk about. You have to take DeAndre Ayton with the #1 overall pick.
It sounds like you're saying Luka will not be like a perennial all-star type player,
I don't
but
see
if
that.
he's rid
I don't believe he's a lottery pick. He got good vision, but he still got slow feet. We tend to over-sensationalize European basketball.
And we've seen many players come from over there. He's going to be this, he's going to be that. You know, it's a different ball game here. It's not the level and the competition is totally different.
I hadn't studied the guy's skill, but I watched the highlights. The dude had 14, 3, and 5, and they're talking about him like he had a Russell Westbrook 40-point triple-double.
It's incredibly important that the Phoenix Suns don't mess this up.
to this?
I am a fan of Luka Doncic. This might be the biggest star in the NBA.
It's not even close. I've been trying to tell Skip this old baby bird since he hatched. That's the closest thing to the guy that I grew up. That was my favorite player growing up in South Georgia, Larry Joe Bird. I said, this is the closest thing you're gonna get to it right here.
The 2018 NBA draft was loaded with talent. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Trae Young, Jalen Brunson, Michael Porter Jr., DeAndre Ayton, and a couple more names. But none of these players came into the draft with more questions than Luka Doncic. Even though he was fairly unknown to the North American audience, all his stats and accomplishments overseas screamed that this guy was the best player in his draft class. But the fears of other talented Europeans that came into the league clouded any signs of potential his game showed. Today we take a deep dive into the reasons why these three teams that had an opportunity to take him didn't take the risk. These are the teams that passed up on Luka Doncic. Prior to the 2018 NBA draft, the Phoenix Suns finished the regular season with the worst record in the NBA, 21 wins, 61 losses, and the second worst record in franchise history at the time. And this is what it looked like in Phoenix for the past 3 seasons. At the end of the 2018 season, Phoenix began looking for a new head coach to lead their team. Heading into the draft, the Suns hired Igor Kokoskov to be the new head coach. Igor was an assistant head coach for the Suns from 2008 to 2013 before taking other assistant coaches positions at other teams. Igor became the first NBA head coach to be born and raised outside of North America, while already being the first European to hold a full-time assistant job at an NCAA D1 basketball program. Igor was a well-respected head coach not only in North America but also in international play, helping the country of Georgia qualify for the Eurobasket tournament 3 times, and in 2017 helping the country of Slovenia win its first gold medal in competition at the Eurobasket tournament. Led by the tournament's MVP, Goran Dragic, who Igor helped develop when he was a rookie in 2008 in Phoenix. Right beside Dragic, helping the country win its first tournament, is this guy. Look familiar? That is an 18-year-old Luka Doncic who finished the tournament averaging 14 points per game, 3.6 assists per game, and led the entire team in rebounds per game with 8. This was months before he'd go on to lead Real Madrid to a EuroLeague championship while being named the EuroLeague Rising Star, EuroLeague MVP, and Liga ACB MVP. And that isn't even half of the awards he won as a teenager playing against grown men. Luka was serious, and if there was any head coach in the NBA that knew how good this kid was, it was the guy that had just coached him to a gold medal a year prior. Igor knew who the best player in the draft class was, but being a first-time head coach at a new organization meant he had little say on who Phoenix would select with the pick.
And Igor obviously knew what Luka was, but a rookie head coach just hired by Robert Sarver, I think he was informed really quickly that he had absolutely no say in what that pick was going to be. That Robert.
In 2016, the Suns drafted another highly scouted European, Dragan Bender, with the 4th overall pick, but he wasn't panning out to be the player they thought he was. The fear of drafting another European bust definitely played a factor into the franchise making a safer pick, so the Phoenix Suns ended up choosing DeAndre Ayton from the University of Arizona. The Suns with Ayton the following season ended up winning less games, and as a result, Igor was fired from the head coach position after 1 year on the job. He'd returned to being an assistant coach in the NBA while spending a year overseas coaching in 2020. This is where he told a reporter that had the Suns drafted Luka, he would still be the head coach of the Suns today. Years later, Luka got his revenge on the Suns by handing them one of the most embarrassing Game 7 losses in playoff history, where in the game, the Mavericks led by as much as 46 points, while giving us this photo that will live in Suns infamy forever. The The Sacramento Kings were in the midst of a long and miserable playoff drought, and by 2018, it had been 12 seasons since they made the playoffs or won more than 38 games in the regular season. And out of the multiple draft picks they had gotten over the time period, only one player panned out to be all-star level talent. They'd finally struck gold with last year's draft pick, De'Aaron Fox, but with the second overall pick in this year's draft, they had a chance to truly set the franchise back on a winning path. After Ayton was selected with the first pick, Doncic was certain that he gets selected second overall by the Kings.
At any point leading into the draft, did you think you were going to end up in Sacramento?
I did. At some point I did, but yeah, it didn't happen to me.
The Dallas Mavericks, who had the 5th pick in the draft, also thought the Kings were taking Doncic off the board.
We're thinking for sure, Luka's going number 2 because there's a connection there, everything, right? And didn't happen, right?
The connection Mark Cuban is referring to is this guy, Vlade Divac, NBA Hall of Fame player, former player for the Kings, and the general manager of the Sacramento Kings at that time. Vlade was born in Serbia and spent time playing for the Serbian and Yugoslavian national team. Then there's Sasa Doncic, Luka's father, who played for the Slovenian and Yugoslavian cadet national team. These two guys knew each other, and Vlade knew well about Luka and his accomplishments overseas, but Divac still made the decision to draft Bagley over Doncic. It's been revealed that Divac was the person who made the pick for the Kings and said that Marvin Bagley was the better fit and better player for their franchise.
What went into the decision to not draft Luka Doncic and to go with Bagley at that number 2 spot?
Marvin's for us, better fit, better player, and great talent. So
Divac also revealed that drafting De'Aaron Fox a year earlier also played a factor in passing up Doncic, saying, "I thought Fox was a player who could become a franchise player in the future. Time will tell if I'm wrong. As things stand now, it looks like I am, but I have faith in young Fox that he will have a better career." He also spoke about how having both Doncic and Fox on the same team wouldn't work because both of them are players that need the ball. If he drafted Luka, he would have to trade Fox, which in hindsight, we all know is wrong because 2 of Luka's best seasons in the league came alongside another guard who needs the ball in their hands. 2 years after the draft, Vlade stepped down as GM for the Kings, telling reporters, "I still believe Marvin has big upside, but I needed more time to prove it. I'm sure Marvin is going to prove everyone wrong, but in this league, you need to produce right now. People don't have patience, but I'm okay with that." Vlade's decision in that draft stained his reputation in Sacramento and created tension in his relationship with Kings owner Vivek Ranadive. Vlade's reasonings on why Doncic isn't in Sacramento right now has been the accepted answer for Kings fans. But there is a conspiracy that the reason why Doncic isn't a King is because Vlade didn't like Luka's father. On the Walsh podcast, ESPN reporter Tim McMahon revealed that Vlade wasn't a fan of Sasa, which trickled down to not choosing Luka.
Vlade, as close as he was to Luka, my understanding is that him being so close to Luka and knowing his dad so well factored into their decision. Basically, he didn't think a whole lot of Luka's dad, and the old like father, like son. Well, I don't know. This is a different dude. You messed that one up, Vlade.
This theory floated around for a couple days before Sasa reportedly shot it down, calling it fake. Sasa told a news outlet that he and Vlade spoke about it and laughed at the story. Divac also addressed the rumors, saying, "I know Sasa very well. I love and appreciate him. He even played in Kraljevo when Luka was little. It has nothing to do with the relationship." Luka hasn't forgotten that Vlade passed on him though. On March 29, 2024, over 5 years after the draft, the Mavericks faced off against the Kings, with Vlade sitting courtside. Doncic hit a game-sealing free throw and immediately waved goodbye towards Divac while saying he should have drafted me, making his way back to the bench. And after the final buzzer sounded, he was clapping and pointing at his direction while walking to the locker room. Luka has not forgotten. Coming into the 2018 draft, the Atlanta Hawks had won just 24 games in the regular season, the lowest they've won in 13 years. They were given the 3rd overall pick in the draft as they were in desperate need of a new franchise player. It's important to remember around this time in the NBA, shooting had become more important than anything, thanks to Curry and the Golden State Warriors, as well as James Harden and the Houston Rockets. Many teams started to believe that three-point shooting was now the driving force to winning championships. And coming into the draft, there was a consensus as to who was the best three-point shooter in the entire class: Trae Young. Since high school, his greatest strength has always been referred to as shot making. And it wasn't just his shot making, it was also where he was taking his shots. It resembled one other guy in the league at the time, and it wasn't just the shooting that was similar between the two, it was also similar body types and athleticism. Travis Schlenk was hired by the Atlanta Hawks to be the general manager of the team at the time. Before accepting the Hawks job, Schlenk spent 13 years working as a video scout, assistant coach, and assistant general manager for the Golden State Warriors. He was there when Steph Curry was drafted in 2009, and was influential in the team's decision to draft Klay Thompson and Draymond Green. Schlenk saw Curry's development firsthand and ultimately saw a lot of him in Trae Young, and he believed that Young could be a franchise cornerstone to win championships in Atlanta. The Hawks made their mind up and wanted Young. Knowing that the Grizzlies weren't interested in drafting him, Atlanta made their pick available to anyone who wanted to draft Doncic. And with just over 2 minutes left on the draft board, news broke.
The Atlanta Hawks and Dallas Mavericks have agreed in principle to a deal that would send the 3rd pick in the draft from Atlanta to Dallas for the 5th pick and a future first-round pick from Dallas to Atlanta. It's contingent on this. The Hawks will select Luka Doncic with the 3rd pick. They will send him to Dallas. And if Trae Young is still there at number 5, and he's expected to be, Trae Young will go from the Dallas Mavericks at 5 to the Atlanta Hawks at 3.
The Dallas Mavericks had pulled the trigger to move up the draft board. Only a 2019 first-round pick to the Hawks was involved in the deal. Years after the draft, on a podcast, Schlenk reportedly said the Hawks weren't locked into drafting Trae Young. One of the reasons they took him was because they were given an extra draft pick in the process of drafting someone they already liked as a prospect. Saying on the Woj podcast, to be able to take 1 lottery pick and essentially turn it into 2, that made sense to us. The 2019 pick the Hawks were infatuated with turned out to be Cam Reddish, who with the Hawks averaged 11 points per game, 3.4 rebounds per game, and 1.4 assists per game, while also dealing with numerous injuries. Atlanta traded him away after 3 seasons with the team. Years later, Doncic ended up scoring 73 points against the Hawks, tying for the 4th most points scored in a single game in NBA history. And in the post-game conference, he spoke a bit more about how he could have been an Atlanta Hawk.
So Luka, of course you were drafted by the Hawks. In the 3rd quarter, maybe the 4th, the fans start cheering. How did it feel to hear the cheers from the Atlanta crowd?
Oh, it was great, man. I could have been here, but I think it benefits for both sides. I mean, I think it's a big deal, but there's always going to be trades in conversation when you come back to one place that could have you.
The guy the Hawks traded on draft night ended up scoring the most points against them in their own building. As it currently stands, Doncic has by far been the best player from this draft class. DeAndre Ayton played a huge factor in Phoenix making their first NBA Finals appearance in almost 3 decades, including a game-winning basket in the conference finals. But his desire to receive a max contract ultimately played the biggest factor in his relationship with the franchise deteriorating and leading him getting traded away from the team. Marvin Bagley, on the other hand, did not dominate the NBA like he did in college. Add multiple injuries into that mix, and you get a guy that simply has not lived up to expectations coming into the league. Bagley spent 4 seasons with the Kings before being traded to the Pistons as part of a 4-team trade. Trae Young has been the best player to pan out from these 3 draft picks. As a 3-time All-Star and with a 3rd-team All-NBA selection, he led his team to the Eastern Conference Finals in 2021, where he had the most debut points in a conference finals game in NBA history. But for many people, what he does doesn't matter unless he achieves more than Luka Doncic. That trade on draft day linked these 2 players' careers for life. Their achievements will always be compared to one another, and as it stands, Luka is far ahead of him in achievements. From the year 2000 to 2018, the year Doncic entered the league, there have been 9 European players that were drafted 5th overall or higher with 0 college basketball experience. And of the 9, only 2 became all-star selections at least one time in their careers. Teams were scared that Doncic would turn out to be like many other Europeans that were highly scouted. These 3 teams chose not to take the risk, except for the Dallas Mavericks, who took a near identical risk 20 years earlier in 1998 by drafting an accomplished European player from Germany. The Mavericks not only hope that Luka stays a Maverick for his entire career, like Dirk, but also lead the team to a championship like he did in his career.